My name is Takioka from the Yokogawa. Actually, for the cyber security threat is really we have to deal with from the IA system. Everybody knows well these things, and then we have been working for over the 10 years to appropriately implement it into the IA control system. However, the business needs is looking for more efficient way to operate plant operations. Those kinds of things will be happening. So now we are having the headache. So how we are going to be achieve that kind of requirement given by Shell? So then, luckily, Shell is provided the quite clear direction for us to working on. And then, however, we are the OT company, and then we need to deal with IT technology as well. So how we're going to get merged together? So, but you can easily expect it. The IT and OT people nature is totally different. I should not say the opposite side. However, I said we have to get married together. But due to under the strong initiative by Shell, so that somehow we can get married with the Cisco. Thank you very much, Tyler-san. And then we really spend a lot of time and money to come out. One of the key points is three companies is come out transparently shared concerns actually. And then what we can do, what we cannot do. So this way, how we're going to be a compromise or what we try to achieve furthermore. Those things, the discussion is spent a lot of time. Then finally, we come out adequate architecture model together with the latest edge of the technology by IT, and then we come from the OT experience in the long period. So it will be going to be convergence between the IT and OT, and then we could establish this secure plant solutions, and then this is just first step. And once you get into this foundation, then you may get a bright future because you get a secure foundation to connect from one after another. So on top of it, we as a supplier can provide add-on added value solutions to achieve the obsolescence management kind of things, or asset management kind of things, or alarm management kind of things. A lot of the OT-related added value solution, we have it. So we can provide it on top of this secure platform. That is our study and our experience coming from the Shell secure plant activity. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you very much.
Thank you. Eric?
Hi, my name's Eric Knapp. I think a lot of the people in the room know me or have heard me speak before. I'm fairly new to Honeywell. I think this is my 13th month at Honeywell. I'm a long-time security guy. I come from the security research side, much like Tyler, and we agree on a lot of things. We disagree on a few things, not very much. The first thing I want to say is that this is fantastic that we have a panel on cybersecurity and there are 2 industrial control vendors on the panel. That in and of itself is a positive trend, I think. It's true. We have operational technology and we have IT technology, and they are converging. And the collision of those 2 domains is rapidly becoming a productive one rather than a painful one. I only wish that with IT and OT and now IIoT, that could we please, with the next acronym, could we have at least 1 additional vowel and 1 additional consonant, because it's going to get really confusing when we start talking about these things.
No, analysts, we
The
don't
IIoT
use
of
vowel
IT and
consonants.
OT.
We just use 3-letter, 4-letter.
Or
no
an
rule with vowels and
umlaut
consonants.
in there somewhere. Now, I want to touch really quickly on one thing. I'm a technology guy. And as I said, it's great that we have control vendors up here. Tyler made a point about technology and getting the basics right and being aware of the shiny objects, and that's true. As operators, you shouldn't be trying to be security experts. You shouldn't have to do that research to find the latest exploits and how to protect against them. Security moves very quickly. It's an innovative field by its very nature. You have people trying to find the limits of the rules and finding ways around them. I mean, it's just the nature of cybersecurity. And so it's not your responsibility to have to do that, but it is the responsibility of the industrial control vendors. it's a moving target. So while you shouldn't be necessarily looking for shiny baubles, you have to be maintaining a pace with the threat. The threat evolves, and so the defense has to evolve as well. And I'll use an analogy of the automobile. The automobile is fairly old now, right? We've come a long way from Model T Fords. Roads have advanced as well. We have multi-lane superhighways. The requirement to have an automobile hasn't changed much. The requirement is you need something that will move from point A to point B over a flat surface, maybe to carry passengers, maybe to carry cargo. So the requirements vary depending on use. But the cars that we have today are significantly different from how cars were conceived. You wouldn't want to drive an antique car through LA traffic during rush hour. It wouldn't be safe. So it's the responsibility of the equipment manufacturers and the people who are developing the technology to be the people who have one eye on the shiny baubles, to make sure that the technology that we're providing is advancing at the correct rate so that we can solve this problem. And that's my soapbox. Thank you.
Okay, Greg.
So my name's Greg Carter. I'm from Cisco, which is probably not a name you hear a lot at these kinds of conferences. But I think I'm going to echo a few things that were already said up here. Obviously, the worlds of IT and OT are converging. That I think is already being productive, as Eric said, but it's very painful. And every single customer that I talk to runs into this. I hear the same comments all the time. That we've shut down, we've created a barrier between IT and OT, and we're trying to do it on our own on the OT side. We've built our own IT shop for the production environments, and that's speaking to a culture clash. And I think that's true. With our customers, it's also true with all of your suppliers, right? And so one thing that I think is really unique about what Cisco and Yokogawa are doing with Shell is that this was that forced marriage that Takioka talked about, of bringing us together and saying, together, two suppliers on the IT side, on the industrial automation side, with our customer are going to figure out how to address this in a way that's scalable and can be pervasive, right? And so staying simple originally, having a flexible architectural framework and a flexible services model to allow it to grow over time, so you can start at whatever level your organization's at. I think this is the right approach, and it's going to vary for every organization about how you're going to adopt things like this, but there's a lot of learnings that you can take from this, and I welcome you to talk to any of us, to Tyler after this, and hear more about, or ask questions about how you can apply some of these learnings to your own organization. I think the other thing I'd back up and maybe really enforce, or my belief in the idea that we have to stop talking about risk, and it's not because risk isn't there, to Eric's point. I mean, you have to keep up with this stuff, but you're never going to sell it that way, right? And budgets are tight, especially right now, and so it's got to be you've got to look at security as an enabler, as a foundation. Put in the right infrastructure. It's no different than putting in your network, putting in your data center, putting in any other part of your infrastructure that's going to support the solutions that are driving production, that are cutting costs. Those are the things that you really need to focus on. And if you sell it that way internally, here's the project, here's the benefits of the project. Oh, and by the way, security is core to that. I think this is what Tyler was getting at when he's saying that if we move forward with that in mind and build security into every one of our projects, similar to what you said, then eventually those vulnerabilities and those risks go away because we've built the right foundation, and we've built it into our culture, and we've built it into our processes.
Oh, well, you two already spoke, so you don't have to say anything right now. All right. I have about 100. I mean, I have tons of questions myself. I don't want to monopolize the time though, but I didn't get. I mean, I had the presentations before that because they obviously had to give them to me, and I looked at them. But until you hear someone talk, you don't know exactly what they're going to say, and so it was a little hard for me to make questions. But one thing I just want to start off with, it happened to be my first question, but it fits in here in the right way. An idea I had before that. It's just that. One thing we see at ARC, and I just want to get the perspectives because of the way things were said here. One thing I have seen in my research, I'm the lead analyst at ARC on cybersecurity, but when I talk to companies, and users in particular, of course, most of them say, we got enough tools, we've got enough products, we need tools to manage that type of technology, but they aren't necessarily going for very advanced technology. I mean, because people, you know, a lot of people will come up, a lot of companies will come up to me and tell about the next version of the thing they're building. And I'm always fascinated by that. But I get the feedback, please, we have enough technology. Now, the interesting thing here, the one thing I wanted to ask, and this, let me start with Noel and Tyler, and then you guys can add in if you like. But in Noel's case, you know, you put together a system that has a lot of networking equipment and stuff in it. But you had a comment at the end of your presentation where you said next-gen technologies, all right? As if it's something in the future. So my impression, and I'm just going to pose this, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's that you've gone a first step with the intention of going to more. Now, when I listen to Ty, when he talks about Shell, it's much more, I mean, he comes from a world of very sophisticated technology and things like that, and it's more saying, listen, we don't need, we're going to deal with 11 controls, and some of those controls actually are more process and procedures and things like that. And I got the impression that you even said, let's cut back on the technology. I think you even made a comment about you don't want to go putting in the next-gen technology. I don't know if you use that same terminology or not, but I got these two different perspectives, which is very interesting to me, because one is just kind of starting, I think, in cybersecurity, if I'm presenting it properly. The other one is very experienced and maybe said, I'm gone over the hump, I'm on my way down. The trough of disillusionment, or whatever the thing is. I hate to use that term, that's a Gartner phrase, but I probably said it wrong anyhow. But so anyhow, if you could comment on that. Oh, which way, how do you view this, and where are you headed?
I mean, for us, we're still new to cybersecurity, right? So this thing was in place like just about a year ago, and for us, cybersecurity is brand new. So anyone at the plant, if an operator asks, like, you know, how come I can't use my USB flash drive anymore? We used to use USB and plug and just insert it, and I could read my, you know, Excel or anything, right? And it's kind of hard to push this to everybody to have an awareness saying that, you know what? The reason why we're getting viruses before because of those USB drives, right? But after this DCS cybersecurity, everything is locked down. No more USB. All the USB drives are all locked down. So for us, anything in the control network, we don't really have visibility at all at this time if someone plug in a computer or a laptop in our, you know, switches or router in the DCS, and we don't know exactly what's happening. Right? The only thing that we rely heavily is our ACL, our routers and switches. That's pretty much it. So what we're thinking is probably put, I don't know, maybe an IDS or an IPS, right, to monitor, to have a secure monitoring, right, the system.
That's a perfect, I'm glad you picked that one, because that's a perfect topic, IPS. And
Good luck.
Yeah, that's, because that's exactly the kind of feedback I've gotten from others. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but this is the maturity curve. This is where I started. This is where the majority of some people in this room I recognize are still, because they make their living on this area. And again, there's value in it. Clearly, you find the value from a company that's trying to do this at the cheapest possible cost, with the most return on investment that's demonstrable to leadership, in a way that integrates all of our suppliers, because they're just a Honeywell plant. We're a multi-vendor environment. We can't do that. It requires people expertise that's not sustainably trainable, because the bar keeps changing. So we've just learned, and in our case, we've decided that the technology solution we've co-developed with Cisco and Yokogawa is our platform for a future technology race. And you can see the modular approach. Maybe it wasn't clear in the PCDIT bow tie we've developed, but eventually, when we're more mature, we'll add in intrusion detection or application whitelisting or one-way data diodes, all fun, fancy, awesome, wonderful stuff that'll help us as the threat evolves. But applying those too early is literally nothing but cost. And if you disagree, please give me a case study that shows me I'm wrong, because I mean, I'm not wedded to the simple approach. It's not overly fun for me to try and convince people to patch their systems. I'm not doing anything novel. My neurons aren't firing to a point where I'm intellectually stimulated, but this is the job I have, and the job is to improve resilience in our facilities, full stop.
But just to clarify, again,
Yeah.
When you say that, and knowing you and knowing your background in that, I'm sure you're not sitting there thinking, I'm sacrificing security. You're not going to say, I'm not going to use application whitelisting, I'm not going to use an IDS, or whatever that advanced kind of technology. You feel that the trade-off of not using it is well worth it, at least for the time being.
It's demonstrable. I mean, we did the math. So, yeah, absolutely. If a vendor comes to me and they have if it's one vendor that says we have an application whitelisting solution, awesome. I need it at all vendors. I can't just introduce a control in my framework that says everyone who uses a Honeywell system has to use application whitelisting. How can you monitor and equate risk postures across multiple lines of business, across multiple production facilities? I need it to be consistent. So until that maturity improves in our marketplace, and we're working with our suppliers, I mean, Eric knows how aggressive we are with our expectations for next generation, but I have enough scars. I don't want to go to our facilities and say, I want you to do this next one, knowing I'm going to get beat up when things break, or an oil movement system gets disrupted and loses a facility $1 million because it's some new box threw some traffic on the wire. And somebody at the facility has to know how to respond to that, and they can't today. They're engineers, and they aren't aware of what this network traffic that comes from this intrusion detection system is doing. So it's just but one thing I need to clarify from a shell hat perspective. You hear us say Cisco Yokogawa providing us a secure plant solution. This is a multi-vendor solution. I mean, they're providing us with a managed service. We're doing it for every vendor across Shell. Our expectations for all of our automation and control system suppliers will adhere to our managed service requirements. We'll pay them for it, but they're just not a provider of the infrastructure and managed service. That's the only difference.
And you're also not saying, just to clarify, you're not saying that Yokogawa and Cisco are going to manage all the different vendors.
Nope, there's no
You're saying
interaction.
You're going to have
with-
arrangements
yeah,
with each vendor.
Yeah, that's the
I
hard
asked
thing to
that
try.
question, and I wanted to clarify because
It's hard to cover that in 20 minutes, but yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, we have to manage security equally across our entire portfolio of vendors. This is just a managed service that Cisco and Yokogawa came together to supply us.
Do the rest of you want to make any comments about technology from the technology, back to the technology?
Absolutely. I usually have an opinion about something.
As do I.
So this is absolutely a question that's answered within the context of maturity. Absolutely. It doesn't make sense to be focusing on very specific use cases, advanced persistent threats, and sophisticated new anomaly detection techniques. If you don't have basic network segmentation, if you don't have basic anti-malware controls, you have to crawl before you can walk. You have to walk before you can run. The question of the next generation moniker, that's marketing. That's what that is. That's to go back to the car analogy. That's to say that a car manufactured in 2014 is a next generation car. A next generation firewall is a more capable firewall, and you should have a firewall. That doesn't mean that, and I don't think Tyler's suggesting that if you are going to create a security policy that says you should have a firewall in place, that you should go back to stateless
Yeah, right.
packet filter firewalls that right? You want a capable modern firewall. It's the firewall vendor's job to make sure that it is meeting the threats that it can meet at that time. It shouldn't be the operator's job to do that. So I hope you agree with that. So you have to get through the FUD. I mean, you really do. But it's also a question of understanding risk. Should you put a firewall in first? Should you segment first? Should you focus on antivirus or anti-malware? Access controls? Where do you focus your attention? Where do you prioritize your expenses? That depends upon your own specific risk profile. What types of risk can you tolerate? And risk is not threat, right? Risk is a function of threat, vulnerability, consequence. What systems are most important? What threats are they potentially exposed to? And what are their vulnerabilities to those threats? When you understand all that and you can measure that, you can do a few things. You can prioritize where you want to spend for cybersecurity. And I think the ones that flow to the top are going to be the more basic controls until those are in place. And the other thing it's going to do is it's going to help you phrase that in terms of opportunity costs, like Tyler said. If you're reducing risk by implementing security controls, risk is very understood by CSOs, CFOs, and somebody with training, say, an experienced CFO, will be able to take metrics around risk and very easily translate those to cost and opportunity cost. If I know that this system or this asset goes down, and it's this percentage likely that that will happen and it's worth this much money, anything that costs more than that to implement in terms of a security control doesn't make sense, and anything that costs less than that does. So it all ties together.
Can I ask a question of the audience? How many of you have ever received a risk assessment report that you probably paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that said the same thing? They're all, a risk assessment from Eric is going to look different than a risk assessment from Tyler.
That's true too.
So, it makes sense on a small facility, but help me if I'm wrong. Every consultant loves risk assessments because they give you a nice fancy report, a different matrix of red, amber, green, and so forth. So I agree with the concept. We use the concept, but we defined it our own in Shell, and we didn't go to the facilities. We did not allow them to debate risk. We said, we'll essentially define risk our way. We will defend it with math. We will defend you from encroachment of other people telling you the risk is different. And we're going to give you the minimum set of controls so you don't have to worry about it anymore. If we allowed each site of 100 and some odd sites to say, well, we think our risk is different. Of course they do. They don't want to invest money at all. And they may be able to justify it today. But in a year from now, when the economic climate changes, which means the consequences change, are we going to rerun a risk assessment, fire 16 people across the world to do it? It's so, with you in principle, applying it at top level is probably where you should start, and then go down granular.
So again, it's a function of security maturity, right? You're at a level now where your organization understands risk. And you're absolutely correct that risk assessment needs to be consistent. If you have 20 sites and everyone's doing a risk assessment, they purchased them individually from different consultants, and there's no standard methodology, there's very little value there. Good business, yeah, that's true. But there's a reason why there's dozens of standards specifically around risk management methodologies, and that's why. Because there has to be a consistent definition of risk, just like there has to be a consistent definition of security that you adhere to if you want to get value from that.
Okay, let me switch to another one of the hot another thing that I saw as a difference between the two presentations, and again, another topic that comes up in my research a lot, and that is, you're going to managed services, you're going out, where you're not, right? If I understood it right. You're doing, because you made the comment about now you can maintain it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But one of the issues that comes up that's tied to that, obviously, is the cybersecurity expertise, and that you brought the thing up with the GICSP, which is, a training program from SANS, by the way. But I run into that as well. How do you keep people, first of all, there's this tremendous lack of cybersecurity expertise in the world. I don't know if I don't want to get, I just did a market study where I was forecasting the market for services, cybersecurity services, and I can tell you the whole market is absolutely constrained by people. It's not a matter of demand, it's a matter of people. So if I can somehow train 50% more people every year, the market's going to grow like that. So that presents a real issue, but yet I was just wondering, so if you were doing managed services, or what your views are with the managed services versus internal, because even in the end, one last finished thing, you mentioned you had 163 people in the organization doing cybersecurity.
Just in my organization.
All right. Now, is that going to change much now that you're going to manage services, or is that needed to deal with looking at incidents, looking at intrusions, dealing with I'll call it day-to-day patching and everything else? That you still need that. The managed services are not doing patching for you and things like that, are they? Or I don't know.
So that'll just go into
It's a long question, I'm
whole
sorry.
mechanism. The first part about the people side of things, so you mentioned managed service, not yet. I think that's exactly the point. They're not going to do it yet, but they will. The industry is moving that way. The business drivers are moving that way. So it's just an adoption curve. But when it comes to the people side of things, I'm a firm believer in build it and they will come. I'm not a fan of sitting in a room and talking any longer. It's been frustrating for a year to just watch these things percolate. So all we wanted was engineers to have a bit of competency in IT and IT to have a bit of competency in engineering. So we built a framework and we gave it to the market. And I think yesterday we have an assurance process every quarter. One of our suppliers, who will remain nameless, has 11 of their project engineers certified to GICSP. It could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. But yesterday there was 0, and today there's 11 people who now could be in our environments, who are operating and installing and configuring control systems, who appreciate security and understand IT. So that'll grow to 100, and that'll grow. So eventually we're gonna get this. So we just got to do it now and get over this debate and move forward. Same thing with managed services. We decided that it might be early. We may be one of the few providers who see the OpEx return on investment right away today, or customers, but we will be the early adopter. We understand that, but we believe that remote operations, remote engineering, all of this remote technology from engineering services will be hugely profitable for Shell, so we're going in that direction, and security is built in.
So, can I just? Sure. I want to give you a chance to know.
I'm just
you go ahead
gonna
and
say-
say. Go ahead and take.
I'm just gonna say something. I know as part of my slides, last few slides actually, I talk about like managed services, as Tyler was mentioned. Actually, last year, end of last year, we kind of have a managed services from Honeywell as well. This is new to us. It's still in a proof of concept. This is for antivirus patching, Windows updates, and all whatnot. So this is still in a proof of concept. And if this thing works really good, I guess we're going to start using this managed services. Absolutely.
You're welcome for that service.
Thank you.
I'll echo that. Everybody should buy Honeywell's managed services. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, so I'd like to add something. From my perspective, we've talked to a lot of customers about this, and I would say at least 90%, the managed services concept is resonating. Not everybody's ready to bite the whole thing off at once, but as they peel it back, here's some of the things that I hear over and over again. Tyler mentioned that I would probably talk about core versus context, and that's a big part of it. It's, we want our organization focused on our business, not having to develop a bunch of expertise that we don't have today in a market that's very constrained on being able to find those people. We want to focus on what we do for a living, right? So that's one advantage. You leave this work to a company or a consortium that does this every day as their business, right? And they can consolidate those available resources to make that happen. And secondly, because you're doing it that way, you're getting a better service than you can deliver to yourself, because it is not core. And unless you're going to, even in Tyler's case, he's got a fairly large organization compared to what I think most of the industry is able to put together, but he's still very constrained on being able to do all of this work, right? So you're going to get a better product out of having a specialty organization that does this and delivers it to you. And then the third thing we hear over and over again is the OpEx versus CapEx advantage, right? Of having somebody that's going to take all of the investment required to put in the infrastructure, to put in the software, to do the management, to do the deployments, and turn it into something that's very easy for you to consume, and very easy on the balance sheet, in a way that makes sense. As your sites are turned up, you're being charged per month per site. So that kind of model, those are the big things that I hear over and over again from customers about why they're looking towards managed services.
If anybody out there has a question, raise your hand. I'll keep asking questions. It's just my nature. I warn you. Yes, please. Can you turn on that microphone over there for him?
Testing. Yes, okay. So I have a question for the vendors, and Tyler happens to be a colleague of mine working at Shell, so take this as it is. One of the things I've noticed, and I work in the IT side of the organization, and one of the things I'm doing is trying to work with Tyler and others to figure out how we're going to take both the IT part of the technology and the OT and how that's going to go down the same journey. One of the places where I've seen IT spend huge amounts of dollars, $30–40 million in Shell alone, is on a concept called IT for IT, which is the tool set, configuration management, all the stuff that we have to configure and manage the IT stuff on the IT side. I don't see it, and maybe I'm missing it, I don't see that tool stack showing up on the OT side when they're playing with the same technology that IT has been using for years, like say for configuration management. So I don't know the maturity of whether CMDB or configuration management tools are going to use standard IT stack type tools, and are we going to be able to integrate that type of information together? Because change management is becoming more important. If you make a change in the OT side, the data going up to the value stream up at top side, they don't know what's happening. We have no way of communicating that because we haven't tied our CMDBs together. So it's a question about sort of the management of the OT IT stack. How is that moving forward? How mature are we? So it's to Honeywell and Cisco and Yokogawa. Thank you.
No, it's okay.
So I wish our managed services manager were here. I'm probably not the best person to answer this question, but you know, if you were to look at what's being used to manage operational technology today, it's with any technology that's introduced into OT. Sometimes the IT tool sets are sufficient. Sometimes they work great. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes you need something specialized. Sometimes you need something proprietary. It's just the nature of our industry because the control systems themselves are in some ways open and standard, in some ways they're proprietary and specialized. But I think you will find that those tools do exist. They may not look exactly like the ones you're familiar, but they do. Certainly within our SOC, it's a fairly impressive tool set, which again, I'm not super familiar with point by point by point, but those tools do exist.
So I'm also not going to give a terribly specific answer, but I will say that, you know, I think that's a natural outgrowth of these worlds coming together and of the suppliers on the IT side and the OT side beginning to work together to come up with solutions. This is one example that we were talking about here, about what we're doing with Shell, and we're applying, you know, best practices from the IT world to solve industrial security and having to evolve those and modify them as it makes sense. And I think the same thing can be said for configuration management. You know, it's another one of those controls that you've got to put in place. And, you know, if you looked, the bow tie example that Tyler showed is a very pared down version of a much more comprehensive industrial security framework that has a ton of other controls that you need to consider, right? And configuration management is one of those. And, you know, we're going to get to that. The industry is going to get to that, and each customer is going to get to that. But it's when these vendors from the two sides of the house come together to start solving those problems and applying best practices from the two worlds. I think that's what's really going to drive it.
Did you want to comment?
Yeah, you could also actually same. You know, basically, if really straight away go to the IT tooling functionality to be applied for the OT side, the functionality-wise, it may be a luxury for them to use it, and maybe the outcome of the tooling may not be applicable for them to understand. That situation will be happening. So that's why the convergence between the IT and OT is quite important thing. That means the IT people is giving some best practice kind of thing from the IT world, and then we try to verify as part of the POC, and then it will be going to be applicable for OT user to utilize frequently, and then we are going to utilize. So that means OT supplier cannot choose the such thing. However, that we can get such a support from the IT supplier. Then we try to find an optimized way to utilize the tools. The way we try to achieve that. Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Good afternoon, Hajime Mashite. Mora Abad from Reliability Web. I would like to ask two things. The first one is, in your organizations, are you implementing the framework ISO 55000 or risk management ISO 31000? In case that you're doing it, in case you're not, when are you planning to implement it, or if you're planning to implement it? And the second question, it is, how do you see the landscape of cybersecurity risk 5 years from now? Thank you very much. Arigato.
Who wants to comment on that?
Don't know. I didn't catch exactly what ISO standard you're talking about, but again, you probably heard me say
Is that an IT ISO standard? IT cybersecurity risk?
It's asset management standard, ISO 55000.
Oh, okay, I know.
And ISO 31000 risk management.
Okay, so before I started, the asset management methodology in Shell was Excel, and that's probably still where we're at until we have an application that gets deployed through our wonderful managed service that can collect information, and then our methodology will be that. That's to say from a security perspective. I don't know how asset management is done in our engineering environments. They probably have lots of wonderful methodologies like that. So from a risk perspective, both from a framework and a ISO and ISA and IEC and all that kind of stuff, those are all good inputs to our framework. We will decide what controls go on environment based on our expertise. and we will consider the expertise of our industry brethren as much as we need to. From a risk perspective, again, I'll follow my own advice. Talk to me in 5 years, and hopefully this will be in place, and I won't be worried about anything but what happens in 5 years. So my head will be down, our organization's head will be down, we'll be implementing for the next couple of years, and then we'll look out to the landscape and figure out what's going on out there. Again, until, and I'll be quick, but that's not to say we're not going to surveil things that are happening or respond to incidents. We have a pretty mature incident response process, so we'll react, but in theory, we will be staying focused on our control framework.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Or? Yes, please.
Yes.
Do you have this one on?
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, remote unmanaged operations as well as having contracted support for patching, et cetera, all require robust, secure remote control and access. What sort of solutions are you guys utilizing? Have you standardized solutions for that? And what do we see, where do we see secure remote access headed?
In our case, this is pretty new to us. As I mentioned earlier, we're using Honeywell remote support. Right now, it's about 2 months. It's been out for 2 months now, and I find it really secure because that landed in our DMZ. It doesn't really go to the control network. What I think the way it's set up right now, it goes to the DMZ. We have like a relay node, and that relay node actually, it's like it's just a service that runs, and that points to our service node, and it does all the connections. I don't really understand the whole gamut of this thing here, but it's been implemented by, in our case, it's Honeywell, and I find it really, really secure. I mean, we're the first site at Agrium that have managed services still in proof of concept for remote connectivity, and everybody said, you know what, remote support, I don't think it's good, but right now we're trying it and see what happens. I mean, I came from a big company. I used to work for ExxonMobil before, and remote support is like, it's been there for like 10 years, right? So, but for us, because it's a smaller company, and it's like, I don't want remote services to the control network, especially for us, we're a chemical company, and we make ammonium nitrate. So if something happens, that site could be, you know, a crater next day. You'll never know, right? So again, it's good, and we're using it, and hopefully, if everything is good, we're going to continue using it. It's expensive.
Just to
though.
clarify, was your question for remote support of the software, or is it for remote operations? Okay. I thought it was. both.
So I just want to, I'll clarify a little bit because we're talking about the Honeywell service node for remote access. Any remote access obviously needs to be secure, but just our regular VPN probably isn't good enough, right? You want to make sure that obviously you have authentication and access controls. You want to make sure you have strong encryption, but you also want additional controls around that. You don't want an always-on, anybody to anybody type of communication. You want to only allow connections in when they've been authorized from the inside, and other controls around that. And the Honeywell solution provides that. I think if we were to take a look at it with the Cisco solution side by side, I think we'll find that they're extremely similar. Can't speak to that 100%, but I'm pretty sure. It's really it's about best practices, right? Obviously, you don't want to just have anybody be able to come in and provide remote services. You want to have really, really strong controls in place. When you do, then you have those best practices in place. You now have the capability to drive value and provide a real benefit. Again, core competencies of security probably exist on the outside of that remote connection more than they do on the inside. So it does make a lot of sense, but it does have to be done correctly. My little kumbaya moment is that I think it's great that we're talking about this. I mean, even just a year ago or 2 years ago, to talk this long about remote access
It's awesome.
to a plant would be kind of amazing. Yeah.
Tyler, do you, well,
No, go
any
ahead,
more
Greg.
comments?
I was just going to say, I mean, I think the key thing there, again, is the reason that we're talking about it, right? So it was about remote operations, or about, you know, what additional productivity, you know, are we going to try to drive by having this solution in place? And security should just be the given, right? Yeah, of course it's got to be secure. And in terms of the Cisco solution, I mean, there's nothing magic going on here. It's standard security architectures. We think best of breed software products from Cisco, as well as from a number of other vendors. The thing that's unique that we're doing, again, is bundling that into a managed service and continuing to evolve it and tailoring it to the maturity level of the customer.
So I can just describe a quick thing on the remote access platform. So the funny part about all this is that each one of our vendors ended up using the same technology anyway. So I can say, not with 100% confidence, but when it comes to remote access, whatever you choose, as long as all your vendors use it and you can standardize the way people come in and out, you can build your controls around it, then you're golden. We used to use Citrix and other types of solutions, but we magically found the remote support services from all of our suppliers were built on the same underlying platform. So all we did was, for those that weren't using it, we went to them and say, certify this device, please, and if you want to come into Shell, you're coming in using this application, and it's that service. So from a secure plant perspective, at this time, I have a native connection from a WSUS server to our suppliers. So I get updates when they get updates. Comes to me centrally. My secure plant solution distributes that in a equivalent fashion across the world in near real time, so all of my sites get the patches updated for all of our systems. It's their job at that point, that my job's done. So Honeywell, for example, can come back in, who sells me my patches centrally, doesn't sell them individually anymore, even though some sites may want that. Sells it to me, I distribute it to the global community, and then they sell back a service to go put them in place. So the value proposition to suppliers is quite strong. We don't want to do patching. We want these guys to sit in their remote operations for all of our Honeywell DCSs and log into the application that we've approved, and they've approved, and Emerson's approved, and Yokogawa's approved, and do patching on their own. So the business case is there for suppliers, the value proposition is there for us, and everybody uses the same platform. It's magic.
And with that,
Until it breaks.
And with that, I think we're going to have to quit. I have another session coming up soon. So, but anyhow, I'd appreciate if you join me to thank the panel and the speakers. Thank you all very much.